Alrighty. Um, so unfortunately, we're not in class for me to explain my CPR quizzes, but I have assigned them to you this week, and I want to give you some background context to what these CPR quizzes are, why do I call them CPR, that sort of thing. So, first off, when we think about test, exam, quiz, like those words make you feel really, really terrible. They make you feel anxious, they make you feel nervous, they make you feel worried and stressed out. Um, but the research actually shows, and this is where my kind of background is. From my previous school, I did a little bit of project research to improve teaching practice. And one of the things I learned about was how learning can occur during the testing process. And so part of the problem is we see tests as being the end of learning. You are trying to demonstrate what you learn, whereas in fact, the whole process of sitting and doing a test helps you learn. And that's because of something called retrieval practice. So retrieval practice is when you're pulling information forward in your mind and you're retrieving it. And every time you have to retrieve that information, it improves your understanding of that information and improves the memory of that information. So I obviously am a scientist and I need to collect evidence. So back at my previous school, I gave my classes quizzes, and in the first term, they didn't have any weekly quizzes, and that was their breakdown of their grades. So we had people that achieved, merit, excellence, and not achieved. And then in term two, I started introducing weekly quizzes to them. And we can see that there was a big increase in the excellences. The merits went down, but the merits went down because they went up to excellence. And same thing with these achieves. The achieves went down, but it's because the overall grades were shifting upward and we had less students failing on the assessment. So that's what my year 9s looked like. And this is what my year 10s looked like. And my year 10s struggled actually a lot more. A lot of them, this is the one I want. A lot of them weren't meeting the requirements and had failed the first test. But with the weekly quizzes, we see that number has become a lot smaller. And again, we see that upward trend in our grades. And even though, yes, the achieve has gone down, it's because it's been going into that merit level and that excellence level. So we can see that introduction of weekly quizzes have really helped my previous classes. So the question becomes, why does this work? Well, every time we attempt to recall information, it boosts our long-term memory. And the reason why is because when you sit there and you're trying to recall the information and you realize you can't recall that information, that helps you realize, I need to study this. And if you can retrieve that information, that then tells your brain, okay, I don't need to keep studying this. And so what this is going to do is it's going to better support you in making those decisions on how to use your time. How do you want to use your practice? Because you want to basically use your time efficiently. The other thing that the quizzes do is that they reduce the test anxiety because now you're more familiar with the questions. Now you've sat it in multiple times, so you're not as stressed out when you do have it in the real thing. The other thing that's really useful about that is the teacher can then use it to highlight content that's most likely going to be tested. And that's what I've done with my CPR quizzes, is that I have selected questions that mimic or are exactly from exams. Cool. So on top of the CPR, which I don't think I even defined, it's the critical practice of retrieval. CPR, yeah, critical practice of retrieval. Anyway, when you're doing these quizzes, to help take off the pressure and anxiety from it, is that you sit this quiz 3 times. You're sitting it all in one session. Basically, the first attempt you sit this quiz, I want you to answer everything that you can, and you are just using your brain. There is no notes available. You are just trying to access what's already in your head. Once you finish writing all that answer, I want you to highlight that in yellow. So in this case, since these quizzes are on Google Docs, you'll just highlight the text in yellow that you type. Then, after you've answered everything that you can with your brain, you are then going to access your notes. You can access the internet, and you're going to add to your answer or edit your answer depending on, maybe you made a mistake or you made an assumption that was wrong, or maybe you can add more layers to it. Anything you add or change, you then highlight that in blue. So in this case, again, with the Google Doc, you're just going to highlight it and put it into blue. The last thing then we do is our third attempt, and that third attempt is when you get assistance. So you can get assistance from your classmates, you can get assistance from me. If we were in class, I would have everyone have these little stop-go cards, so that way if you were still on the first or second attempt, you can tell others that you're not ready to discuss. And then you can flip it over here, and that's letting your classmates know I'm ready to have my work looked over and for us to have a corridor and check our answers. But in this case, with the third attempt, I would suggest that you share the document that you have answered with a friend and read it over and give each other feedback. You can even have like a Google Meet call during that free afternoon sessions that you guys have in order to check your work. And anything you add or change, I want you to highlight that in green. And this is really useful to you later because when you go back to look at these quizzes, you will be able to tell by the color code what did you know and what did you not know. You also will be able to check the quality of your notes. So that's why that color coding is really useful. And the main reason why I take my time to explain my CPR quizzes is because students often don't know how to study. They have really poor strategies, and they think that if they highlight, if they reread, if they cram the night before, they'll do well. And in fact, that's not what the science says. When it comes to brain science, the best way to learn, first off, is distributed practice. So you should be doing a little bit every so often and not doing a huge chunk the night before. So cramming the night before is not a good way to retain information. But also the answering questions, that practice of testing, that is the most effective way, because then you have to access the knowledge in your brain and you have to think of different ways that question can be phrased and how you can phrase your answer as well. All that kind of summarizing, the highlighting, the underlining, this is not particularly helpful. It's very passive learning and it's not actually going into your brain, and it's not training you to use that information like a test would. So that's why I do these CPR quizzes. And hopefully once you see the fruits of your labor, you'll be more likely to keep doing that work. So that success will lead to more success, and it's creating those good study habits. Here are the links for all the articles that I read to create this kind of presentation if you're curious in learning more about the brain science and how we learn. But I figured giving you guys some background information to why I do these CPR quizzes is useful, so that hopefully then you buy into them.